Welcome back to the pitfalls and bear traps of acceptance testing of lighting controls under the 2013 Building Energy Efficiency Standards, Title 24, Part 6, here in the state of California. This course is designed for engineers, designers, architects, and contractors, and commissioning agents and anybody else who is concerned with the installation of legally mandated lighting controls in the state of California. Because complicated, conflicting, and hard-to-decipher design standards exist concerning area controls and multi-level controls, we're going to spend some time here. Remember, these controls do not require acceptance testing per se, as they are just multi-level controls and area controls. Controls must be installed per manufacturer's instructions per 130.0D of the Building Energy Efficiency Standards. Systems, remember, systems must meet all the Title 20 requirements for the standalone controls that they replace, and any mandatory control behavior that is specified by Sections 130.1 and 130.2 of the Building Energy Efficiency Standards as well. Area controls, switches, dimmers, scene controllers, and the like are typically, far too typically, required to be installed in the non-residential function area with the lighting they control. In other words, they are expected to be readily accessible in the area with the lighting. Several lighting control functions in that area will require separate area controls per function. These area controls cannot be overridden by other more sophisticated controls. In other words, you gotta be able to turn the lights off. There are exceptions to this, far too few, and I mean exceptions to putting the area control in the area with the lighting, and we'll see this in a few minutes. Remember, if you get stuck, you can use a key switch or a lock box to make sure that the readily accessible control is not actually used by unauthorized persons if you've been forced to put it into a place where that would render the non-residential function area unsafe. Stairwells and corridors are not explicitly excluded here. Now this changes for 2016, but as it stands now, it depends on where the corridor or stairwell lives. Okay, so no further comments at this point, but we'll get back to this one. Once again, you gotta have them area controls, and usually in the area with the controlled lighting. This odd bit of code is going away for 2016, so if you see it, you can pretty much ignore it, I think. But remember, the Building Energy Efficiency Standards actually are law. But I think if you're following them, you will definitely fulfill this. Now let's begin looking at the requirements to have essentially dimming controls wherever an area control is a requirement. In other words, multi-level controls. This code requirement is telling us that, with a couple of suggestions, with a few exceptions, if a dimmable luminaire has been installed, it will require a manual dimming control as its area control. If a multi-level control is required for a lighting function in an area, it must allow for turning the controlled lighting on and off as well as dimming. Right. This is a very interesting table. It is specifying the steps of control per luminaire depending on the luminaire technology and the wattage of the luminaire. Everywhere else in the code, it depends on where the luminaire is located. So you can expect some conflicts. Table 130.1-A not only states the minimum multi-level requirements for a specific luminaire type, but also states how lighting uniformity will be maintained among a group of luminaires controlled as a particular lighting function in a non-residential function area. Here we see what non-residential function areas fall under the requirements of Table 130.1-A, with very few exceptions. Note that anything that screws into a socket that is not HID, in other words, basically medium-based devices, large CFLs, incandescents, and LED luminaires will all require continuous dimming if they're going to screw into a medium-based socket. And almost always manual dimming controls. Track lighting is different. Note that Table 130.1-A is referring to power levels, okay? They're talking about how much power is being consumed, not necessarily the lumen output. Track lighting is treated differently. But track lighting still has to meet all the requirements of 130.1 if required, because of shut-off controls, daylighting, and demand response. Once again, different lighting functions in a non-residential function area have to have independent area or multi-level controls. Remember, lighting controls may not, quote, override each other, unquote. Surprise! Remember, acceptance test technicians do not test the functions of area multi-level controls as such, but they could become quite confused during testing if an out-of-code multi-level control allows them to override the daylighting controls and hang up the lighting above the daylighting set point, because that is not cricket. Here we see total of 2 exceptions to the multi-level control requirements. Another suggestion: do not install lighting controls that create an unsafe condition. Technicians in my course of instructions are warned that even if you pass acceptance testing, if it is, in your opinion, unsafe, do not pass it. Okay, before we panic, let's look at mandatory shutoff controls. Then we can panic. Okay, we're going to look at an example of a stairwell in a non-residential building, not serving motel, hotel, guest rooms, or residences. And you tell me if I'm not wrong about it being a bad year to be a lighting designer in the state of California. And we'll pick this up in Pitfalls section 04.